Okay, I make it 4 p.m. where I'm in London, so let's kick this off. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm James, Senior Marketing Manager here at ProQuo, and today's host. It's lovely to have you all join us for our webinar on how to create an RFP for a forward-looking brand tracker. Thank you all for joining us. For sure, I'm sure this is going to be a really insightful and practical session, and I'm delighted to introduce our two presenters joining me today. First, Brittany Pinney and Danielle Wiseman. Both are experts in the field of market research and particularly in helping consumer brands to grow. Brittany is our Chief Revenue Officer and she leads our sales, marketing, customer experience team. So she knows many a thing about the requirements of our customers and particularly consumer brands. Previously, she's led strategy for Coca-Cola, for Samsung and Keurig Dr. Pepper, to name a few. Danielle is head of our brand partners team. She leads the consulting side of our business. So she's responsible for helping our customers on bespoke projects, solving unique challenges, answering the biggest, toughest questions that brands can throw at us. It's probably, arguably, one of the most varied roles across ProQuo. Thank you both for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, James. It's great to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
In a moment, I'll hand over the floor to you to talk about what we've seen from the past 12 months or so in terms of RFPs that we've received from consumer brands of all shapes and sizes, and how to make the process going through an RFP as smooth and as comprehensive as possible. But before we get started, I just want to kick things off with a quick poll. So it's likely you've joined our webinar today, or you're watching this on demand after, because you're currently doing an RFP, or you're about to do one pretty soon. So I'm curious to know a little bit about our audience that we've got on today's webinar as to where you're at in that stage. So a poll is just going to pop up on your screen now, and I'll leave this live throughout the webinar, and we'll revisit some of the insight that this gives us at the end of the session today when we head to our Q&A. But I'm just curious to see, where you guys are in the current process when it comes to RFPs. So as I said, I'll leave that live so you guys can keep voting on there. But without further ado, let's dive into the webinar and let's learn how to create an RFP that sets your brand on the path to success. Over to you, Brittany and Danielle.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And thank you all for being here. I see we have a great room full of people. I assume, as James said, that you are here because you are either in the process of evaluating your current brand tracker or in the process of thinking about bringing a new tracker on board. So first of all, Danielle and I have been talking a lot about this and wanted to say kudos to all of you guys for even doing that, because it's arguably one of the most difficult things to do within the market research space is bringing on a new brand tracker. Likely you're starting to look at your current brand tracker and seeing that it's not completely fit for purpose, or that it could be doing something that's more actionable for your brand teams. But what that means is, probably leaving years of trended data behind from your old brand tracker. So it's really not an easy thing to do, but sometimes it's a really important thing to do. So what Danielle and I wanted to do was help you guys out with this process. As James said, we work at ProQuo. ProQuo is a brand tracker. So as you can probably imagine, we've seen our fair share of RFPs for brand trackers over the past few years, and they really vary in the quality and the comprehensiveness. But across all the different categories we've worked on RFPs for, from food to beverage to health and beauty to services to even museums, funnily enough, there are some common characteristics that seem to lead to a better, more successful process for our customers. And we wanted to do this webinar to share those learnings back with you to hopefully improve the RFP process for you, make it simpler and make it a little bit more fun. So what we've come up with is a set of 6 steps that we feel are really the ones that you need to make sure that you take in order to ensure that you have a successful RFP process for your new brand tracker. So the first one is really digging deep into the pains that you're currently having with your current brand tracker, or maybe it's currently experiencing pains because of lack of data in general. If you don't have a brand tracker, or you don't have one that's very frequent, but you want to really look at those pains, because what we see is if people that we're working with are really focusing more on the benefits that they want to get or the features that they want to make sure that they're getting in their brand tracker without really like thinking about the pains first, they often tend to pick something that's going to really still have them experiencing some of those same frustrations that they're currently experiencing. So really dig deep about, you know, when my leadership asks me for something, do I have it at my fingertips to give it to them? When my brand team needs something, am I able to provide that to them? Am I giving them the data that they need? Is it insightful? Is it granular? Is it actionable? What are the frustrations within that? So Danielle, I wanted to ask you about this because you've been working with a lot of these RFPs over the past few years. What are the pains that you tend to see are most common across, you know, the insight space that we've seen over the past couple of years?
Of course, you've touched on a lot of them. Just briefly, I'd say the biggest challenge that we see, the biggest pain point that comes through the most clearly is inaccessible data. You know, you're in a meeting with your leadership team, a question comes up about your brand's performance, and you just don't have the answers at your fingertips. And this can have a real detriment to momentum. Fast-moving businesses need really, instant access to data. When you get access to data, oftentimes it's backwards facing. You're working with reports with a historical point in time view that doesn't provide you with that consistent pulse of your brand. This can make it really difficult to know what's actually driving your brand's performance and why. Next pain point is that data and insights are fragmented and inconsistent. Different tools and frameworks are used by different teams for different initiatives, and piecing all of that together into a cohesive picture or narrative that can be actioned against, Herculean task, really overwhelming. It makes it really easy for data to slip through the cracks. Lacking actionability. This is a big pain point for a lot of teams that we work with. Data points that are interesting or maybe even indicative broadly of how your brand's performing may seem helpful at first, but when you actually roll up your sleeves to start digging into that data and working out how you're going to use it, you kind of get hit with this wall. What am I supposed to do? You spend a lot of time wrestling with those next steps. And you're often left questioning what it all means and how to take, that next actionable step in an effective way. And lastly, there's nothing worse than getting, this valuable data back to you and it's unreliable. The movements you see in your tracker can be difficult to reconcile with your view of what's actually happening in the market. So identifying and understanding different drivers that underpin your brand's growth and equity is really vital. Some metrics move faster than others. Some are really heavily influenced by seasonality. So getting to that granularity to understand why things are happening can really give you that confidence in the data and also how best to use it.
Yeah. Definitely. I've seen a lot of those same pain points, Danielle. And I just actually pulled together a few of these quotes that I've heard recently when going through the RFP process for some of our customers. And I just wanted to touch on one like real life example, because I think across all of those pain points, which all do exist, one of the key ones that I feel like is over and over and over again in the past 6 months has been the inaccessibility of data part. In fact, I was just sitting down with one of our customers a couple of months ago in February, and we were just talking about like all their pain points in market research. And particularly we started talking about their brand tracker, and they all looked at each other and they were like, wait, where are our results from Q4? So we're like in mid-February, and it just dawns on them that they don't have their results from Q4 yet, that they do need to share up with their leadership. So that kind of speaks to that like inaccessibility and backwards facing of the data that a lot of our customers are trying to move away from.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that being said, you've now kind of uncovered those pain points. The next step that you need to go through in the RFP process is determining your evaluation criteria. This is something that's really key to really get underneath across all of the teams and stakeholders that are going to be involved in the RFP process, is to align the 4 to 5 criteria that are going to be the things that are going to be table stakes for you to have within that RFP or within that brand tracker, so that you can evaluate those across all of the businesses that you are going out to participate in this RFP process, and use this criteria within a scorecard to determine who moves from round 1 to round 2, so that you know everyone that you're spending a lot of time with in round 2 has at least checked the key boxes of the things that you need that are going to be table stakes for your brand tracker. Danielle, can you talk us through the key evaluation criteria that we've seen as being the most common that have led to success for some of our customers recently?
Absolutely. We see several criteria emerge, and they're often tied to overcoming those pain points we just discussed. The first, no surprise here, is real-time measurement rather than point-in-time tracking. A tracker that's always on gives you a true finger on the pulse for your brand, rather than waiting for that next point-in-time dip that's already going to be backwards facing by the time you get your hands on it. Instant access to data is another. You need access to your data at any time to move as quickly as your category and your competitors. This is the fuel for your team discussions to keep that momentum going and to kind of keep you at the cutting edge of your category and your competitive set. Integration of behavioral science. What's the engine behind the tracker? Are you getting a true representation of how people really feel and intend to behave? A tracker that gives you a view on your audience's gut instincts, on their system 1 responses, where we know 95% of our decisions are being made, makes for a better and more confident decision-making when it comes to brand planning. Integration of AI. This is a hot topic across every category, but particularly ours. AI can be scary, but it can really boost effectiveness of how you use the data and forge inefficiencies in the process. Simply put, AI can crunch enormous amounts of data much better than us mere mortals can. So being able to, crunch tons of data sets and point you in the right direction, it can seriously cut costs and save time and getting you faster to that insight. Cross-market, cross-category, and cross-brand synergies. If you're operating across multiple markets or multiple categories or have multiple brands, whatever the case may be, having a tracker that gives you a consistent view across the board opens up powerful insights around things like local market nuance. What works in one market may not work well in another. So knowing how and where to flex your brand can give you a really considerable edge on the competition. Analytical prowess to identify leading indicators of market performance. This really ties back to the pain points we discussed around inaccessible data and backwards facing data. You want your tracker to provide insights that are predictive of market results. Seasonality is a great example here. When you have a consistent view that's always on, it helps you get to a better understanding of when certain drivers of consideration are going to be more top of mind. And this allows you to really optimize all of your marketing initiatives so that you are putting your brand in front of customers at the right time with the right message. And you can know that by tracking seasonal trends. Insights that drive action, not just report and validate. This is really key. We're all about actionability. And that really, the best question to ask is, can you tell a story with the data? Storytelling really helps drive actionability and aligns your key stakeholders across the business. Does your tracker make it easy to weave a clear narrative? And lastly, does the tracker deliver on metrics that are most important to your business? Every vendor is going to have their own framework and metrics, but you'll also have very specific things that you're looking for along with your leadership team. Make sure that the metrics that matter most to your business will be delivered by your tracker so that you're not facing too much disruption when you're moving on to a new tracker and onboarding with a new vendor.
Yeah. I think those are all really good ones, Danielle. When we were preparing for this webinar, I was looking across some of our most recent RFPs to double check that this criteria was kind of consistent across those. And it's really crazy how consistent some of this criteria is these days with what our customers and a lot of brands out there are looking for. That also ties into the next step in many different ways, which is make sure that your brand tracker is going to stand the test of time. So, I know that if you guys are thinking about getting a new brand tracker on board right now, you don't want to be back in the same place a year from now or even 2 years from now. It takes a while to onboard a new vendor, and it could take a couple of months to get all of your brand teams up and running on something new. So you really want to make sure that whoever you choose is going to be able to innovate with you and is going to be able to move and change with the needs of the industry, with the needs of the category, and with your own needs, so that you don't feel like you're moving faster than they are. So a few things that I think that you can look at is, first of all, understanding from the candidates that you're talking to what kinds of technologies they're using. If they seem to be utilizing new technologies to do things like removing bias from the sample and making sure that data quality is really good and cleaning out open ends and things like that, then you can be really sure that they're going to continue evolving those technologies with new advancements that become available. Danielle touched a little bit on AI. I know that that can be a really scary thing. However, it can be such a superpower to humans. It's not a replacement for the humans, but it can really be a superpower in helping to make sure data is clean, and helping to analyze data, and helping to give actions for the data, so that the human is really kind of has this superpower. And what that actually ends up doing is decreasing the cost of your tracker. It's like trackers that are less expensive these days are probably not less expensive because they're not as good. They're actually probably less expensive because they're better. They're utilizing technologies and things like that that actually make it more affordable, so that you don't spend half your research budget on your brand tracker moving forward. That's going to help keep it something that you're going to be able to keep year after year. Finally, or next, behavioral science being incorporated. Like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have a brand tracker that's really getting to the accurate ways that people are making decisions about the brands that they're going to purchase. So make sure that you're incorporating that within your brand tracker. Again, there's also no excuse to not have predictive measurement these days. The days of like needing only 2 brand tracking dips per year is really gone. If you're able to access real-time data, that means you're also able to have predictive measurements of what is actually going to be a leading indicator of what's happening with your brand. Along those same lines, same thing with marketing effectiveness. You want to be able to have something on board that is going to be able to report on and predict marketing effectiveness, so that year after year, you're really giving your brand teams better and better direction from the insights that you're giving them. And finally, this is kind of something that's a little bit separate, but all of these things I'm talking about, technologies, AI, behavioral science, a lot of these are things that are emerging that are really trendy within the industry, and that people will kind of try to jump on the bandwagon. Make sure that you're digging deep into how those methodologies are being used and the team that's behind them, so that you can be sure that they're utilizing them in the right way. So we've gone over steps 1 through 3, which is basically about, all of the inputs into the RFP process. But step 4 is a really important part to ensure the success of your process, and where we've seen a lot of RFPs get really delayed for our customers is you need to make sure you get early buy-in from all the stakeholders within your business. Danielle, you've recently seen some issues here. So can you just talk us through why this is so important, and what people on this call can do in order to ensure that they don't get stuck at the very end without the buy-in?
Of course, yeah, early buy-in is crucial, and it really makes for a smooth onboarding process and helps you get to that first value moment faster. And that's ultimately what you want. No downtime, get to the good data right away. So take your team and the wider evaluation committee of your brand, whoever they may be, on the journey with you. You'd be surprised how many times we've seen insights teams get 75% of the way through the process, just to have that process disrupted by another decision-making part of the business. That's not good for anybody involved. So, work out who is on your evaluation committee and make sure they're with you from the very beginning. Procurement is a very important stakeholder. Understanding what their requirements are will be very helpful throughout the process. Do they have a specific scorecard that needs to be addressed in order for them to sign off on a new vendor contract? These need to be covered in your criteria as well. And lastly, what's going to excite and empower the brand teams that will ultimately be using this data to power your brand? A discussion early on about what will make their jobs easier, more fun, less stressful. This will really help ensure onboarding a new tracker will be seamless.
Yeah, that's good advice. And before we move on to the next step, I think an important part of this as well is that this also makes the process more enjoyable and better for your vendors. Like your vendors are also working really hard with you through this process. And one of these people is going to end up being your partner at the end of the day. So making sure that you don't kind of upend things at the very end of the process by not having that early alignment is also an important thing. So let's move on to step 5.
So your next step is working out the deliverables you want to get back from the vendors as part of this RFP process. And consistency is the big key word here. You want consistency so that comparing responses is easy and most importantly, manageable. Set up a document or a tool if you have that capability that makes it easy to compare responses side by side. This will give you an opportunity to identify areas that certain vendors really excel in and stand out. And it'll also help create your scorecard. You don't want to be too rigid though, as this can really stifle innovation and lead you to overlook what could be the best tracker for you. So creating enough flexibility can really help give vendors the opportunity to bring their solutions to life in the way that they see best. This could be a video presentation, a virtual tour, or a branded presentation deck. The time that the vendors take to put into these supplemental materials alongside their official response is a great indicator of how seriously they took your process and what kind of partner they're going to be when you're actually working side by side with them to extract value from their tracker.
Yeah, that is such an important part, Danielle, and moves us right into step 6 here, which is all about identifying the candidates. Obviously, now that you've got your whole kind of RFP process planned, you want to identify the candidates that you're going to put into the first round, get their responses, but also keep in mind that the tracker that you onboard is only one part of the equation. It's clearly a very important part of the equation. It's probably going to be what your whole scorecard is related to. But please also think about the team on the other end who you're going to be working with and who your teams are going to be relying on a daily basis. I would highly encourage you to meet those teams. Ask all the questions. Don't feel like you can't ask. Who's going to be my main point of contact? Meet that person. Make sure that you have good rapport. This person is going to really get to know your brand. If they're a good partner, they're going to really kind of integrate within your team. So make sure that that person is a good fit within your team and that team is a good fit within your team. Feel free to ask the questions about attrition within that team. The worst thing that could possibly happen is, you get one account manager one quarter and then they change out the next quarter and then the next quarter, and you're constantly working to bring new people up to speed. You want to make sure that you have a consistent partner for the ride with you. And that can really, I really have seen, honestly, that this making the biggest impact of a really successful partnership with your brand tracking company versus an unsuccessful partnership. And then finally, I know it's not always possible with timing or budget, but if it is, I highly recommend doing a pilot. Before a brand tracker is a really big deal, right? So you really want to make sure that everything you thought you were going to get is what you actually get. You want to experience that team that you're going to be working with. So if you do have the time and budget to do it, I would recommend a 3-month pilot to really kind of start integrating that business that you think you're going to go with and set up some success metrics for a successful pilot and make sure that that's really, really going to work well for you before you sign on with a new brand tracker. So that's the 6 steps. I'm just going to recap them here so that we have them all in one place. So if you want to have a really successful RFP process, the first and really key important piece is identifying those pains that you're currently having so that you can really make sure that what you select is going to eliminate those pains and you're going to have a really great brand tracking experience moving forward. The second step is to determine your key evaluation criteria and scorecards so that you're making apples to apples comparisons across the businesses that you're looking at. The third step is future-proof it. Don't end up back in the same place a year from now. Really make sure you know what you need, and make sure that the vendor that you select to be your partner in this is going to be able to adapt and evolve with you so that your brand tracker can stand the test of time with them. The fourth step is really important to get team buy-in and alignment, so that you don't get 95% of the way through your RFP process and you think you've identified who you want to go with and what the whole setup is going to look like, only to find out you've missed a key part of the process with one of the other teams and they're not aligned with what you're looking for. So make sure that you get that. The fifth step is deciding on the required deliverables, whether it be Excel or some other type of template that everybody can fill in so that you really have that easy apples to apples comparison, while also determining how much flexibility and creativity you're going to allow in terms of deliverables. One recommendation that I would make here on this one is make sure that if you do get deliverables from customers, from vendors, that you actually take the time to look at them, because that's probably where most of the creativity and excitement within their response lies. So definitely I would make sure that I look at those. And then finally, step 6 is identifying the candidates and meeting them and making sure you have a really great fit between your team and theirs before you move forward. Danielle, you wanted to talk a little bit about something that we created in order to help this process with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a gift for everyone today. A thank you for joining us and something to hopefully help make your upcoming RFP process easier. We've created a simple template that you can use to get started. So keep an eye out for this exclusive document, which we'll be sending shortly after the webinar closes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys again so much for being here. I know we've had some questions pop in. So James, I think you're going to come back and read off those questions for Danielle and I so that we can answer the questions in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Danielle. I think those 6 steps, they're a really simple but proven process to follow. I think, yeah, it's really great that we've also got that handy template to share following today's session. Just before we do go into the questions, I promised I'd revisit that poll that we did right at the beginning. There's some really interesting insights in there. So a third of people on the call today had said that they're planning an RFP in the next 3 months. 17% said in the next 6, and then 50% actually said there's no plans in the next 12 months. So it's kind of that people are either looking at kind of ahead at the next quarter, or an RFP process is something that maybe they've not done before or not done at the company they're at, and there currently are no plans. So before I go into the questions we've got kind of in the Q&A that have been submitted, I just wondered whether you guys had any reflections on what we've seen in the poll there.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. I actually think the fact that 50% of the people on the call have said that they're not planning an RFP in the next 12 months just shows how much planning time it takes for a big change like this. You know, we see this all the time. You know, we'll start talking to brands today that we might start working with a year and a half from now. You know, it's not a decision that's made overnight. I am excited that I hope this webinar may have spurred you to think about some of the things that you might be able to improve with your brand tracker, because, you know, I think a brand tracker is something that it's a table stakes thing to have within a business, yet it tends to be something that kind of lies there. If you've had the same one for years that you're just kind of using to report key numbers to leadership, but if you're not actually using it to help your brand teams make decisions, to drive action for your brand, to understand and impact marketing effectiveness, maybe this is the right time to really start thinking about that. That I think that's kind of the exciting thing, is kind of helping people to see that opportunity.
Great. Yeah. Danielle, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Or
yeah, it is a scary process. And so I hope we were able to kind of break it down into much more manageable chunks, because the sooner you start, and, you know, the sooner you can get to, you know, the value of having a really effective tracker. yeah, I think it's an exciting time for any brand manager or insights manager.
Definitely. Yeah. And let's dive into some of those questions then. The first one we've got is, what's the most important criteria for a brand tracker? I think I'll hand this over to you, Danielle, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Real-time data, we've said it a few times, but I stand by it. Real-time data collection and always on access for you and your team really helps make decisions live and gives you access to predictive trends to help supercharge any marketing plans. It is key to actionability and maintaining any sort of momentum. So being able to exit a really strategic meeting with your leadership team, go find the answer, come back and keep pace with the momentum that your leadership team are looking for is akin to a superpower, really. So, and that is ultimately only unlocked with real-time data. So I would prioritize that as being the most important criteria.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice tip there. Looking at the other questions we've had come in, the next one is about the process itself. How long should you give suppliers typically to respond? What kind of time frame is reasonable? Maybe as someone who's directly involved in responding to a lot of our RFPs that we receive, Brittany, I'll give this one to you.
Sure. I mean, that's an interesting question. That's a tough one. I mean, it's different across the board. But I do have a couple pieces of advice here. So first of all, obviously, every business is different. So make sure that the timetables that you set work for you and all of the teams on your side really well and are going to kind of allow all the teams that need to be involved to be involved. But that being said, I would say the most successful RFP processes that I've seen from the vendor side would be when you receive an RFP, you have about a week to look through that and make sure you understand everything and ask questions back to the potential customer that is putting the RFP forward, because it's really important that they might think that they're giving you all the information that you need, but you probably have a lot of questions. So then allowing those vendors to kind of come back with those questions and then sharing the answers for all of those questions out to the entire team of people who have responded or who are going to respond to the RFP. And then make sure you give them adequate time to respond. I mean, as Danielle said, oftentimes you have to respond to an Excel, so you have that apples to apples comparison. But if the company that you're, wanting to work with is really going to want to show their innovation and creativity, they're going to want to put time into a PowerPoint or a video or, any other kind of unique deliverable. So I would give at least a week for the RFP response itself. I think the most important pain point that I would like to give advice to avoid is not being communicative with the vendors. So they're putting a lot of time and effort into this response, and they're all really excited about the potential to be your new brand tracking partner. So there's going to be delays on your end. Just make sure you communicate back with people. If they go 5 weeks without hearing anything, they're starting to panic, oh, have I not made it to the next round? Just make sure you're communicative with them so that they don't start worrying about that.
Nice tips there. I think, yeah, the more you can communicate and getting that time to reply just means you're going to get a better quality response. Ultimately, you're going to get more out of the process.
Yeah.
This is another one related to process, actually, and it's about shortlisting. How many companies should I shortlist?
Yeah.
And yeah, Britt, I'll leave that with you actually as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this will vary depending on how many companies that you decide to put the RFP out to begin with. But what I would recommend in terms of shortlisting is utilizing the 4 to 5 evaluation criteria from your scorecard that you develop in order to pass people onto the second round. So, you've identified the table stakes things that you need. For the companies that pass all of those, move them onto a second round and give them the opportunity to show their creativity at that point beyond just those table stakes evaluation criteria that you have. So that's kind of how I would whittle it down from, the larger group to the smaller group. And then before I would sign on any brand tracker, I would do a pilot with your leading contender, the one that you've decided as a team that you want to move forward with. Try to do a pilot with them so that you can really be sure about your decision before you actually sign that contract.
Good tips there too. Yeah, we've probably just about got time for one more, and this one I'm going to hand over to you, Danielle. It's what's the most difficult part or the biggest challenge in responding to an RFP? And Britt touched on this in terms of needing to turn around a response fast, or sometimes that communication chain kind of being delayed or going down a little bit. What would you say is the biggest challenge?
Yeah, well, RFPs are challenging to begin with, right? It's a very robust process and involves a lot of cross-functional teams and nerves, as Britt pointed out earlier. But with my pro quo hat on, I'd say, our biggest barrier is our brand doesn't have the same level of awareness as other trackers in the market. A lot of teams feel a little bit more comfortable with those bigger names like Kantar and Ipsos, but the new innovative entrants that are on the scene, they're there for a reason. And it's often because they're offering something better that will stand the test of time. And that's certainly something that rings true with ProQuo. We pride ourselves on doing things differently, and different because it's better. We've identified gaps in the more traditional brands that we feel we can deliver much more effectively. So knowing, we're up against, these huge companies with bigger names means we work a hell of a lot harder to show that we're the right one for brands. And when we do make that fit, it is a really, really strong and powerful partnership. We've had partners, over many years because of that. So yeah, our brand awareness, I'd say, is our biggest challenge right now.
Which is a nice chunky challenge for me.
Yeah, exactly.
As the marketing manager. Yeah, thank you, Danielle.
Of course.
I can see we have a number of other questions, but what we will do is kind of go through those, and then we'll come back to you individually with some of the responses to some of the other questions that have come in. But what all that leaves for me is to say thank you very much for coming along to our webinar on RFPs today, and I hope all of you have attended who have learned something about the process. Even if you're not planning one necessarily soon, when you do come to do one, you'll be better informed on the process, what it takes. Hopefully you'll use our template too. And of course, thank you to Brittany and thank you to Danielle for presenting today.
No, thank you, James, for having us. And I would just add, for anyone on the call, feel free to reach out to Danielle or me if you have any questions. James, I assume we'll include a link or something like that where people can reach out, but would be very happy to kind of walk anyone through individually any questions that you have.
And we'll be sharing that template shortly.
Cool.
Thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.